Hi, I'm Brickroad, and I've been watching a lot of tier list content on YouTube lately, so I thought I would make you watch some. This is my Final Fantasy V job tier lists. I'm going to break all 22 of the jobs from Final Fantasy V into one of 6 tiers, with these caveats. These are the jobs from the base game, and also the newly released Pixel Remaster. The advanced and iOS versions of the game have a couple of extra jobs that unlock in the end game that are difficult to place in a tier list because they're so absurdly broken, and you also unlock them extremely late in the game. I'm not really going to consider those. The other caveat is that I'm going to rate these jobs in terms of the Final Fantasy V 4-job Fiesta, which is my preferred way to play the game. This is a yearly event in Final Fantasy V where you determine which jobs you're allowed to use over the course of the game. Typically, you will get 4 of the 22 jobs. You have to stick with those 4 jobs for the whole game, and you have to have one of your 4 characters assigned to one of those jobs, and exactly one of those jobs, for most of the game. It's a challenge run, basically, but it's a very interesting way to play the game, and it's my preferred way to play it, and it opens up interesting boss strategies and synergies that you might otherwise not explore in a casual run of the game. Some jobs are better for Fiesta runs than others. Now, I'm going to state up front that this is obviously just my opinion, but I did check with NASA, and they ran it through their supercomputers, and it turns out that my opinions are always correct. So if you disagree with anything that goes into this tier list video, what you need to do is scroll down and get really, really mad at me in the comments section. And then we can all just laugh at how butthurt you are. So we're going to jump into this tier list here. I've got them arranged alphabetically for no clearly defined reason. Up first is the Bard, and the Bard is an S tier job in the Final Fantasy V Fiesta, no question in my mind. I've been very, very lucky over the years. I've had Bard roll into my Fiesta team like 5 or 6 times over the years. Insanely powerful. When you first get the Bard, they have a song called Romeo's Ballad that is essentially a free stop spell that works in pretty much every random encounter for the rest of the game. Smooth, smooth sailing. The Bard's Sing command can buff the rest of your team. Some of these buffs are very situational, but some of them are like regen ticks, which are just good to have at any point. Sing is also just a very good command to give to basically any other character in your party. You can have 2 people singing. There's a lot of strategies you can do with that. If you have a way to sandbag against the first form of the last boss, and you have Bard in your party, it really doesn't matter what else you have, because you can buff your entire team to level 99 with max attack power and agility, and just go ham sandwich. Bard also gets the Hide command, which makes some shenanigans possible. The only downside to Bard is if you play a Fiesta rule set where you're assigning Bard to the party before you have access to any of the songs. You'll always have access to the Sing command, but you don't actually get your first song until you can make it to Crescent Island, which is a fair ways into World 1. Before that point, Bards are terrible. Probably the worst class in the game. The only thing they can do is equip a dagger and hope for the best. So if you roll Bard really early in a Fiesta rule set where you have to use Bards long before you're able to get the Sing command, I really hope you get some better job to kind of buddy them up with. Bards are also fairly fast. They're one of the fastest jobs in the game, which a lot of the time means they're going to be the first one to get a command in battle, and you can select Romeo's Ballad and Bob's Your Uncle. Yeah, just a solid job, S tier. If you have Bard in the original or advanced, or I believe iOS version of the game, you can beat Omega. Congratulations. All you need is that Romeo's Ballad and a little bit of practice. I don't think that strategy still works in the Pixel Remaster, but this is the only job in the game that can guarantee you an Omega win, regardless of your party composition. Bard is S tier. I don't think there's going to be a lot of debate about that. Beastmaster, this is a D tier job. Beastmaster uses whips, which are okay weapons. The problem is they don't scale well. There's only 4 or 5 whips in the whole game, and you don't get whip upgrades regularly enough to keep a Beastmaster keeping pace with the rest of your team. You do get the Blitz Whip pretty late in World 1 when you can go into the Jackhole Cave. That's a pretty good weapon for that point of the game. You also get just the regular whip on North Mountain very, very early in the game. So if you do have a Beastmaster in your party because you're using an illegal rule set where you've assigned Beastmaster before you've unlocked the job, making use of that whip, you can paralyze enemies. It's pretty good. But the bread and butter of the Beastmaster class is being able to capture and release monsters. And there are good monsters to capture and release, but this is a very situational ability. It's not repeatable. Each character can have one captured monster at a time, and that's it. Once you've released it, it's gone. You've got to go catch another one. And catching monsters is really, really frustrating if you don't have the backup of a job like Time Mage that can use Graviga, or Blue Mage that can use Deathclaw or something like that to lower their HPs without killing them outright. I don't like the Beastmaster. It's one of the few jobs in the game that I've committed to. You know, I've done a Fiesta run with Beastmaster. They have a job fair where if you get a job you don't like, you can pay some money to the Fiesta charity and roll a new job. And Beastmaster is one that I'm happy to roll away every time. Speaking of which, Berserker is the worst job in the game and is the only F-tier job in the game. Berserker has no benefits whatsoever at any point in the game that I'm aware of, except for they get access to Death Sickles about halfway through World 1, and I don't think any other job gets access to a death command that early in the game. That's not that big of an advantage. Berserkers are slow, their signature weapon is axes, which are unreliable damage. The iOS and Pixel Remaster version of the Berserker is a little bit better, because originally the Berserker, you can't issue commands to them. They're berserked. They just attack whatever they want. They just pick a random target and go to town. Well, Berserker can pick targets in the back row, which means a lot of the time they're just dealing half damage. You're just penalized because they've picked a target that you wouldn't have picked if you had control of the Berserker. I think the iOS and Pixel Remaster version of the Berserker will always attack the closest monster to your party, so that's not a problem anymore. But guess what? That's also not a problem for any other martial class in the game. You would always just pick a target in the front row to get your full damage. Berserker is also very slow and doesn't synergize with anything. The only ability it gets is the Berserk ability, which you're not going to put on any other class. And any ability from another class that you can put on Berserker to improve it could also be put on any other class. There's a reason that the Fiesta has a special rule set called Berserker Risk, which trolls you by giving you extra Berserkers if you sign up for it. And I think the only boss fight in the game where Berserker is an asset above and beyond other classes would be the Crystal Guardians fight in the second world. A Berserker can use the Death Sickle in that fight to one-shot their opponents. They can also wear the bone armor and a flame shield in order to get healed from the fire crystal in that fight, provided they don't stupidly kill the fire crystal first. That said, there's a lot of ways to cheeseball that Crystal Guardians fight, so Berserker's having a slight advantage in that one fight at that one stage in the game is not terrific. The only saving grace of the class is that it can equip shields, and shields are super good in Final Fantasy V. Any class that can equip a shield is very survivable. But there are lots of classes in the game that can equip shield that aren't Berserker, which we'll get to. Black Mage is an A-tier class, for sure. Black Mage is pure damage magic, primarily elemental magic, fire, ice, and lightning. And Final Fantasy V is one of the games in the series that has rod-boosted damage. So if you equip a fire rod and cast a fire spell, your fire spell will do extra damage. The great thing about Black Mage is the answer to pretty much any problem you have in the game. Every boss is susceptible to black magic in some form or fashion. You will never find yourself in a situation where you cannot deal damage. A Black Mage on the back row, throwing spells, you're pretty much good for the whole game. The reason Black Mage is not S tier is it does fall off a bit in World 3. Black magic damage kind of takes a backseat to the damage output of something like Summoner or Time Mage or some of the martial classes. It's just a solid Kind of boring class that can put damage out there. They can also equip rods. Any class that can equip rods can break rods, which means when you arrive in Karnak, fairly early in the game, and can buy rods, you have access to the Tier 3 Fire, Ice, and Lightning spells. Of course, Black Mage can use those rods to boost their natural spells, which is probably the better use for them, but breaking rods is a Hail Mary in quite a lot of boss fights. If you have a class in your party that can break rods, and you've got rods in your inventory, you basically have a poor man's Black Mage to play with if you need one. Blue Mage is also an A-tier job. I'm going to put it slightly behind Black Mage, I think. Blue Mage is a very strange class. It has a lot of weird kind of utility spells that you have to go out and collect yourself from monsters. So you will have to play using a walkthrough so you know what's where. First of all, Blue Mage is one of the mage classes that can use shields, which means it's pretty survivable on the front line, which is nice. They can also equip swords, which means their damage output with just melee is okay. But you really do have to know ahead of time where the good blue magic is and how to utilize it. That being said, almost every single boss in the game has some cheesy blue magic strat that will just win the fight for you if you know what you're doing. Even if you don't know what you're doing, very early on, Blue Mage can learn the Vampire spell. It's one of the first spells they can get in the game. You get it from the bats in the Pirate Cave where you start, even before your first job unlocks. And that just drains HP from a target, which makes Blue Mage very survivable at pretty much every stage in the game. Blue Magic is also just a really good auxiliary command to give to some other class. For example, if you've got any other mage, giving them a Blue Mage backup ability just gives them access to more magic options, which is excellent. So Blue Mage will carry your team. It can also augment an otherwise already strong team. You got a lot of options, but you do have to play off from the walkthrough. But no class makes you play from the walkthrough more than the Chemist. And I'm putting Chemist in the B tier. Chemist is the best job in the game. Mathematically speaking, Chemist can do things that no other job can do. I'm pretty sure Chemist is the only job in the game that can solo Omega without having to be level 99. The Mix command breaks the game open in some very specific ways, mostly defensive ways. Mostly a Chemist, if you know what you're doing and you have the supplies, you can make yourself functionally invincible in any of the game's boss fights. That said, that functionality only opens up quite a bit in the back half of World 2 or even World 3. If you are doing an early Chemist run and a Fiesta run, Chemist really can't do much except sit there with a knife. They do get an innate pharmacology ability, which means items heal for twice as much. That means high potions are just really good for the whole game. That's 1,000 points of healing for every high potion, one of the best healing classes imaginable. But playing a class from a spreadsheet I always find very boring, and I'm always underwhelmed when I get Chemist, because it does have this reputation for being completely broken, but I'm always finding myself underwhelmed with what it can actually do in the boss fights that I've got to get through. There are a couple of potions in the game that can raise your stats, like the Iron Draft, the Hero Drink, that kind of thing, that only the Chemist can use. I've never found these to be particularly useful in a fight. Here and there, they're okay. Basically, if you're going to be relying on Chemist, you're going to be relying on setting up a lot of defensive buffs and doing a lot of healing over the course of a boss fight, and it's usually better just to put out a lot of damage if you have that option. We have Dancer. Dancer is fine, but also kind of frustrating. I'm feeling Dancer is a C-tier job. The problem with Dancer is that it's a martial job. It needs to be in the front row to deal its maximum damage. And it can use daggers, and most classes can use daggers. Daggers are pretty good frontline weapons, but the Dancer can't use heavy armor and cannot equip shields, which means they're very squishy on your front line. The Dance command can put out a lot of damage. The way it works is the game rolls a random dance from a list of 4 dances. 2 of them are drain attacks. One drains HP, one drains MP. One is a confuse attack, which only confuses the target you're dancing at. And the real prize is Sword Dance. Sword Dance is just times 4 damage on whatever your attack command was about to do. That's actually pretty good, and very, very late in the game, Dancers get some unique equipment that replace 2 of their dances in their list with Sword Dance again. So you're getting Sword Dance very, very reliably. The problem with Dancer is if you're relying on it to put out most of your damage from your party, you're going to be rolling dice a lot, and you're going to waste a lot of turns trying to confuse bosses that can't be confused, or drain MP from bosses that you can't actually put it to use. That said, Dancer is a pretty good class as far as synergies go. I mean, you can give it any other command and it'll do pretty okay. And the Dance command itself is pretty good to give to another class. For example, a Bard doesn't have a lot of good options for putting out damage, but if you give a Bard a main gouge and put them on the front line and have them dance, you might get a 600 damage Sword Dance, you never know. Dancer will get you there, but not without a lot of frustrations, and I've seen some game overs that would not have happened if Sword Dances had just come out at the proper time. That said, there is a knife that you will get in World 2 called the Dancing Dagger, which basically gives any job in the game the dance command attached to their attack command. A lot of Fiesta parties have to rely on that Dancing Dagger to get Sword Dances to put out damage, and that is even more frustrating than having an actual dancer, because your chances of picking that Sword Dance out of the list are 1 out of 5 instead of 1 out of 4, because the regular attack command is also an option. None of that has anything to do about the dancer itself in particular. It's just all kind of tied to the same frustrating command, and it all orbits the same neurons in my brain. Dragoon is fine. You know what? It's a B tier job. I'm going to put it behind the Chemists. It wears heavy armor. It uses shields. It can equip swords and spears, and it can do some damage, and that's it. It's just a solid job that will get you there if you need it. Freelancer. Freelancer is an S tier job. No question in my mind. And I'm going to put it probably just ahead of Bard. It's got to be one of the strongest jobs in the game, especially in a Fiesta run. And that seems counterintuitive when you first think about it, because a character who's a Freelancer isn't gaining ability points in any other job. But the Freelancer has 2 really, really important benefits. The first is Freelancers can equip anything. They have no equipment restrictions whatsoever. You can mix and match equipment however you want. So if you have to have a Freelancer in your team, they can be a frontline martial class with heavy armor and a shield. They can be a backline caster with your good magic gear. They can equip the healing rod, or the healing staff. They can equip any elemental rods and break them if need be. Freelancer can do it all. The other benefit is that the Freelancer gains all of the passive benefits from all of the jobs that character has mastered. For example, if a character has mastered Ninja, when they switch to Freelancer, they can innately dual wield without having to equip the dual wield ability. Obviously, in a Fiesta run, this isn't going to come into play until World 3, a good ways in. But depending on what jobs you roll, you might be able to see the benefits of that much earlier. For example, Bard only takes like 180 ability points or something like that to master. You'll master Bard by the end of the first world if you roll it. And a Freelancer who has mastered Bard will get the agility points from the Bard, and now you just have a really fast Freelancer. Obviously, the strength of the job is very dependent on what other jobs you roll in the Fiesta, but it's really hard to picture a scenario where a Freelancer in a team that has at least one other job, and therefore access to some other abilities, isn't a great class to play with. Freelancer is one of the 2 jobs that will not show up by default in the Fiesta. There are special Fiesta rule sets you've got to read through and sign up for. I've only gotten it once myself in a Fiesta run, but I would be happy to see it again anytime. Geomancer is a D tier job, and I'm thinking pretty close to the bottom of D tier. And with this, we now have my triumvirate of hated jobs. We have the Triforce of suckiness down here. The Beastmaster, the Geomancer, and the Berserker. When I see these jobs, I want to roll them away using the job fair. I don't want them stinking up my team. Geomancer is a hard-coded job. What I mean by that is at any stage in the game, any particular dungeon or level or boss fight you're going through, the Geomancer is either good or it's awful. And there's nothing you can do to influence whether it's good or awful. The reason for that is because its abilities are tied to the background graphic of the fight you're on, and you can't control that. The Ronka Ruins at the end of World 1, Geomancers are fantastic. They'll roll excellent spells. You'll see a lot of Wind Slash. It's really good. But that same Geomancer in the Forest of Moor in World 2 basically has no good options. You'll never roll anything. Their equipment set is pretty awful. Bells just aren't that good. And they don't synergize with anything. You're not going to want to give their Gaia command to any other class, except I think it gives like a +1 or +2 magic boost. So if you roll a blue or a black mage, you might give them the Gaia command to boost their magic by a little bit, but I've had Geomancer in a couple of Fiesta runs, and Geomancer just always ends up being a worse version of some other job on your team. Like, you'll have a Geomancer that can sing, or a Geomancer that is worse at casting black magic than your black mage is. They can't equip staves, they can't equip rods. They have colorful pajamas. That's really it. That's really all they have going. Knights. Knight is an S tier job, and I'm putting it at the front of S tier of the jobs we've seen so far. You cannot go wrong with Knight. If you've rolled a Knight, congratulations, you've won the game. It really is that simple. They use not only heavy armor and shields, but they get a terrific strength bonus, which means their damage output is going to be great. They get the two-handed option, which means they can forego their shield to double their damage output if you like. And they can equip special great swords, which are swords that no other class in the game can equip. And some of these are really powerful endgame weapons. Excalibur, Ragnarok, Brave Blade, if you want to go that route. The great thing about Knight is the Knight can carry your party through the whole game, and then anything else you have in your team that can make that Knight stronger or more survivable is just going to be icing. If you've got any other job that can heal, or cast haste, or buff, all they really need to do is prop the Knight up, and that will win the game for you. Having access to swords is also very important because there are elemental swords, so Knights can hit elemental weaknesses. There are swords that can deal status ailments, like there's a Slumber Blade, there's the Ancient Sword that can hold things. These are situational, and most classes that can equip swords also have access to the same equipment set, but Knights have access to that equipment set and the strength to back it up. If you have a really squishy frontliner, like you've got a dancer, or you have to rotate a chemist or a thief up to the front to help do some damage output with their knives, the Knight can use the cover command to take damage for them, or they can combine the cover command, which triggers automatically on party members who are low on HP, with their guard command, which reduces physical damage to 0. Congratulations. If you're fighting a boss that can only put out physical hits, which is more bosses than you would think, you're now invincible. You have the Knight, and whoever they're covering cannot be damaged for the duration of the fight. Knights can also heal themselves. They equip an elemental weapon and the matching elemental shield. They can attack themselves to replenish their own hit points and drain the damage from their own sword. That's also very situational, but it's a trick that not many other classes can make a lot of use of. If you have Knight paired up with Thief, congratulations, you can steal the Genji equipment. That's some of the strongest equipment in the game. Nobody else can use it. All of these equipment set benefits also apply to Freelancer, who can also use all the heavy armor, all the shields, all the great swords, but the Knight actually has the strength to back it up. If you have a Knight paired with the Freelancer, once somebody has mastered Knight, that Freelancer gains the strength from the Knight job, and now it's like having 2 Knights, and that's half your party. So yeah, if you would ask me 20 years ago what one of the best jobs in Final Fantasy V is, I probably would not have said Knight, but now that I've got a lot of Fiesta runs under my belt, I have many runs where Knight was the MVP of my group for the whole game, and I've had many other runs where I was like, man, I really wish I had Knight right about now. After the Knight, we have the Mimic. As far as I can tell, the Mimic is a joke job. I'm putting it... Oh... Yeah, I think this is appropriate. Well, no, can Mimics equip rods? I think Mimics can equip rods, and if that's the case, they really kind of deserve to go here. Because they can break rods. I'm going to assume they can break rods. So the Mimic is a job that can mimic whatever the previous character did, but their equipment set is very, very limited, and they don't get any abilities in and of themselves. So they're really just a neutered version of whatever abilities you already have, And the Final Fantasy V job system is set up so characters can use jobs or use abilities from jobs that they've already leveled up, which means that kind of functionality is already built into the system. Mimic is kind of just a worse way of doing what the whole system is already built to do already. It is the other one of the two jobs that you will not naturally see in a Fiesta run, the other one being Freelancer. It's a special job that's unlocked only in World 3, so very late, so Galuf doesn't even have a Mimic sprite in the game. Yeah, I've played with Mimic in a couple of Fiesta runs, and I didn't like it when I had it. Not much to recommend there. Monk. I'm going to put Monk just behind Dancer, but just ahead of Mimic in the C tier. Here's the problem with Monk, because it's very strong starting out. In World 1, a Monk is pretty good through the entirety of World 1. They've got a lot of health, decent damage output, their kick command is pretty good in certain circumstances. Their DPS actually goes up quite a bit because they can counterattack. Not only are they putting out damage from their own attack command, they're also putting out damage when they take a hit and then counterattack. They also get some status cleansing abilities and stuff like that, but they fall off hard when you get into World 2. Being bare-fisted, the damage formula really is a function of your character level rather than any stat. And unless you're going to spend a lot of time just grinding up experience levels, the Monk is going to fall behind pretty much every other martial job partway through World 2. And even aside from the martial jobs, I wouldn't even trust a Monk to keep pace with the damage output of, say, a Thief or a Bard using the Dancing Dagger and getting Sword Dance procs. It's not a terrible job to get, it's just a little bit frustrating to work with because it feels like it should be a lot stronger than it is, and the only way to make it stronger is to really level it up. The Monk gets a piece of unique equipment in World 3. What are they called? Some kind of knuckles or gloves or something, but it's an accessory. You equip it and it increases the amount of damage they do barehanded, but it takes up your accessory slot. In Final Fantasy V, your accessory slot is for your Hermes sandals. It's for permanent hastes. The amount of damage a Monk can enjoy from the knuckle dusters or whatever they're called in World 3 is more than offset by the fact that they're taking fewer turns. It's also hard to find synergies with Monk, because a lot of the other martial classes are more reliant on their equipment set, which obviously the Monk cannot use. The reverse is a little bit better, because Monks gain passive HP skills, HP plus 10%, 20%, 30%, and those are just good on any job in the game. If you're having difficulty keeping your Dancer alive, throw HP 20%, now they're fine. The only other use I'm aware of for Monk would be to take their counter ability and put it on a better job, like Knight or Samurai or even Dancer, really. Yeah, it's too bad, because Monk is really good in Final Fantasy IV, and it's really good in Final Fantasy VI and future and beyond. They actually have access to what's functionally Monk magic, so maybe it's not a fair comparison, but it just feels like it should be stronger than it is, and it's just too bad that it's not. Mystic Knight. Mystic Knight is an A-tier job, and I'm going to put it right behind Black Mage, only because damage output from Black Magic is just a little bit easier to rely on than the same elemental damage output from a Mystic Knight. Mystic Knight falls behind in the action economy early in a fight because they have to spend a round casting a spell on themselves to energize their weapon to deal that level of damage. So they can cast, say, Fire on themselves and then get a fire attack on every attack from then on. Any enemy that has an elemental weakness, the Mystic Knight will tear them up. And another reason they're in A tier right here with the Blue Mage, which is a very similar class, is they've got pretty much the same equipment set. They can use swords, they can use shields. I don't think they can use all the heaviest of armor, and I think a Mystic Knight's going to want to use magic armor anyway. I think they do get a benefit from their magic stat. I might be wrong about that, but even if I'm wrong about that, it's still a really good class. It's not going to reach Knight or Samurai level damage output. In fact, they might not even reach Dragoon level of damage output, but they've got a lot more utility than Dragoon, and I'm just going to say it, I think the Mystic Knight sprites for all 5 characters are fantastic, and I would always like to have one in my party. One benefit the Mystic Knight has over the Black Mage is that in the end game, the Mystic Knight has the ability to cast the Holy Sword. So if you want to have holy damage output, that's not something a Black Mage can do inherently, but it is something a Mystic Knight can do inherently. Throughout World 1, there's a lot of bosses that have elemental weaknesses. Byblos is weak to fire, Soul Cannon is weak to thunder, etc. And having a Mystic Knight putting out that elemental damage is really, really good. And you're going to see returns on that for pretty much the whole game. Ninja. I'm going to put Ninja... I'm debating, is Ninja the lowest of the S tier, or is it the highest of the A tier? Because dual wield is just so excellent. I'm going to put it in S tier. Ninja, not only is Ninja itself a pretty good damaging class, both because it has good equipment, it can equip daggers, and there's some special ninja weapons and things, but they dual wield, which means their damage output is just going to be really good. But they also have the throw command, which gives them access to scrolls, which is elemental damage. So anything a Black Mage can do in World 1 or most of World 2, a ninja can also do as long as you're willing to buy the scrolls. The throw command, I don't feel like I get a lot of use out of it other than scrolls, like throwing your old weapons and even shurikens and things never feels quite as powerful to me as it ought to, but I might just need to invest in more shurikens. Once you get into World 3 and you start getting things like Twin Lances and the Chicken Knife, anything that benefits from a ninja's naturally high agility is just going to be excellent. It's going to be good damage output, and by the time you're done with Ninja, which isn't going to happen until a ways into World 3, in Fiesta rules, Ninja takes 600 ability points or something. It's quite a bit. But once you've mastered one, you can take that dual wield ability and put it on another martial job. You can put it on your thief, you can put it on your knight. Basically anything other than monk can benefit from dual wield. Ninjas also get the image command, which gives them some protection against physical hits, which is very, very useful in certain fights. And they get the smoke command, which lets them just run from fights that you don't want to deal with. Both of those are super useful at certain points in the game. If you're playing Final Fantasy V just casually, my recommendation is when you unlock Ninja, you basically just pick a character to be your ninja and then just leave them alone for the rest of the run. They're set now. Ranger does not have quite that level of utility, but I still think Ranger... I would put it the high end of B tier, I think. Something like that. And I'm putting Ranger ahead of Chemists because... First of all, the Ranger has the better equipment set. The Ranger is a martial class that equips bows, which means it's doing pretty decent damage from the back line. They can hit elemental weaknesses. They have a fire, ice, and lightning bow. There's a darkness bow that can blind enemies. And then there's some good gimmick bows. There's the Hayate bow, which sometimes attacks 4 times, like a built-in rapid fire command. Long before your Ranger in your party will naturally learn the rapid fire command, which is inherent to the class. But also, Rangers have decent-ish agility, which means putting them on the front line with a dagger is also perfectly viable. They also have the aim command, which is their just built-in skill that never, ever misses a target. There are just some monsters in the game that have really high evasion, or if your party gets blinded or whatever, and Ranger can counteract that. The 2 other benefits to Ranger. First is they eventually learn the rapid fire command. This is going to happen very late, probably not until the final dungeon or World 3. It's a big investment in ability points, but allows you to do the attack command 4 times in a row. This is really good on Ranger. It's also really good on giving the rapid fire command to any other job. If you give rapid fire to a ninja, the ninja will attack with both of her weapons 4 times, and you can also give rapid fire and dual wield to a freelancer in order to do that same trick, but with much more powerful weapons. They can be doing it with knight swords and samurai swords and things. The other benefit that I have Ranger that kind of does put it up in the front of the B tier is they learn the animals command. This is just a random grab bag of effects that the Ranger pulls from. It doesn't cast MP, and not all of them are great, but pretty early on you get a healing animal command which is pretty reliable healing. Like, you can spam the animal command and pretty much assure that you'll leave most fights at or near max health. It's almost as good as having somebody in the party waving your heal staff around. That utility, giving the ranger the option to either heal or do decent damage on their turn, a lot of classes can't do that, especially in like the end of World 1, beginning of World 2, which is kind of a slog area where a lot of jobs haven't really come into their own yet, and you haven't really gained enough ability points to start building good synergies. The ranger has it all just built in the class under their jaunty little green hat. I'm going to put red mage. You know what? I'm going to put red mage all the way at the back of the beats here, and only grudgingly. Red mage can use level 1 to 3 white and black magic, which is fine. Really, really good in World 1, but starts falling off hard. They don't really get access to any good utility magic. Most of the good utility magic in the white magic set, things like Shell, Protect, Reflects, obviously they don't have access to any time magic, so you're not seeing any haste or anything like that. So they can cast the level 2 elemental spells, Fira, Blizzara, etc., or they can cast Cura, and that's really all your red mage is going to be doing. On the martial side of things, they're basically the same as like a blue mage. They have access to the same swords. They can equip shields, which is nice, and they can break rods, which is also really nice, but they don't have the magic stats to really back that kind of stuff up. And the ability to break rods and equip shields is really what keeps them out of the C tier, which is where Monk ended up. Monk doesn't have that same utility, baseline utility of rods and shields that Red Mage enjoys. A maxed Red Mage at 999 ability points, if you go, is it 99? I think it's 999. I think it's the most expensive ability in the game, can dual cast. This doesn't matter unless your Fiesta team has a white, black, or time mage in the party that can make use of it. Which means you can either assign like white mage level 6 to your red mage and dual cast good white magic, or you can assign dual cast to another mage job. If you just roll red mage and don't get one of those other ones, dual cast is wasted and you will not get any use out of it. Have fun in the final boss fight. Casting Cura twice every round is really the best thing red mage can do in World 3. That said, Red Mage does focus a lot on casting the black magic spells, Fira, Blizzara, etc., and they get access to the Enhancer Sword in the third world, which can boost that damage a little bit. So they can like dual cast Fira with boosted damage, which might be almost as good as a Dragoon jumping against a target at that point in the game. Samurai. If you want to talk martial jobs, my dude, you can't get better than Samurai. Samurai is basically a stronger knight in a lot of ways. They have more hit points. They have a built-in evasion ability. Shirai Dori is just every time they're selected to be attacked by an enemy, there's a 25% chance the attack will miss. That's on top of holding a shield and on top of any other evasion accessories they get, and on top of their heavy armor, and on top of their big HP pool. It's really hard to kill a samurai. I think the samurai is the best job in the game in terms of just its power level. The equipment set is a little lacking compared to a knight because they have to equip samurai swords and there are fewer than those, but there are enough good samurai swords at every point in the game that your samurai can make use of them. They're never going to reach a point where they fall off. Samurai also get access to the Zeninage command. Zeninage throws money to deal damage. You can buy your way out of any problem. There is not a boss fight in the game that Zeninage cannot get you through. If you're really roadblocked, which is not going to happen because you've got Samurai in your party, but if you are really roadblocked, there's very few boss fights in the game that a few applications of Zeninage can't solve. In fact, the only ones I can think of are Omega and Shinryu, honestly. Even the very final boss, even Neo X-Death, if you really want to, you can just throw money at that problem and it will eventually go away. Samurai synergizes with lots of things. If you've got ninja, it can dual wield its samurai swords. If you've got knight, it can two-hand a samurai sword to double its damage output. You can learn Shirai Dori and put it on a knight or a ninja or a thief or any other martial class and get that innate evasion. You can pass the Zenonage ability around and have 4 characters that can all throw money. It's just an insanely good class. And if you're finding you're having difficulty with Fiesta and you're thinking you might want to just job fair one of your roles away and you don't know what class to buy, Samurai is the strongest class in the game. There really almost should be another tier above S just for Samurai. Maybe that's what S stands for in this case, is the Samurai tier. Doesn't stand for Summoner, but I'm going to go ahead and put Summoner. You know what? I feel like I've got to put Summoner just ahead of Black Mage. If I can. Like that. Summoner's an excellent caster. Can hit all the same weaknesses a Black Mage can hit. But can also hit better weaknesses. With the Sildra spell, especially in World 3, deals partial water and wind damage, and that can be boosted with a weapon called the Air Knife, which the Summoner can equip. This is on top of the Summoner being able to boost their own spells by equipping rods, which also means they can break rods, which we already know is great. The reason I'm putting Summoner one step in front of Black Mage is Black Mage does fall off a little bit in World 3, and Summoner never does. Summoner has utility spells. Golem is an excellent utility spell that just absorbs physical damage. You can almost never go wrong casting Golem at the start of the fight. The only real downside to Summoner is that they burn through MP like nobody's business, and they don't have a way to regenerate MP on their own. Black Mage can do it, Dancer can do it, Dragoon can do it for some reason. Summoner, you're going to have to watch their MP and probably equip a gold hairpin on them. I cannot remember if summon spells can be dual casted. I don't think so. But if they can, and you do have a red mage, you've just made an already excellent class better. Really, the only thing keeping them out of the S tier is their reliance on MP. If they're out of MP, they're basically not doing anything for you and can't do anything for you. Thief is an A tier job, and I'm going to put it ahead of the Blue Mage. Thief is an excellent job, but like Bard, it requires some backup. You can't just have Thief. You've got to have Thief and something else. Here's all the benefits you get out of Thief. No back attacks, ever. It's just not possible if you have a Thief in the party. They can steal equipment. If you know what to steal and where, there's almost always something you can get that's going to be an upgrade for your team at pretty much any point in the game. The first being in the Walls Tower, where they can steal mithril daggers for themselves. Thieves have the highest natural agility in the game, which means they get the most turns, and agility does factor into the damage formula of knives, which is the main weapon for a thief. Thieves get some weapons they can use from the back row, like the Moonring Blade. They get some other special weapons, like the Twin Lance, which is just really good damage. It deals 2 ticks of damage instead of 1. The main Gouge, which is, I think, a 25% evasion weapon. The problem with Thief is they don't have any good damage output until World 3, until you get him a chicken knife. But any other job you have in the game will benefit from having a Thief, because you can skip random encounters you don't want to fight, you can steal them better equipment or better healing items if you need to. And once you master a Thief, you get the ability Artful Dodger, which gives any other job in the game the same agility they would have if they were a Thief. This is the best synergy Berserker has in the game, is giving them Artful Dodger. There's really nothing else that even works for them. So yeah, Thief is excellent, and eventually they will hold their own with the damage output. If you get them into World 2 and you're okay putting them on the front line, maybe wearing an Elven Cloak for some extra evasion. But they're not going to carry the team by themselves, and they're not going to light the world on fire. Because so many of their good abilities are passive, you can really assign them any command from any other job, like you can make them a second singer, or a second white mage, or whatever you have in the party. Thief can pick up that slack and give them something to do in the random encounters where they're otherwise not really contributing. But yeah, I'm always happy to get Thief, and I'm even more happy to get Time Mage. I've got to put Time Mage at the back of the S tier, I think. There's a lot of S tier jobs in this game. There are a lot of really good jobs. Time Mage, I think, is the best mage class in the game. They can use staves and rods, which means they can use the healing staff and be your party's main healer. They can break rods to deal elemental damage, just like a summoner or a black mage could do. They get access to the haste and slow spells very early, which are excellent. If you want to make your Berserker good, cast hastes. In World 3, you don't need to cast haste anymore because everybody will have Hermes sandals, but that's when you start learning you can get the quick and meteor spells, and now the game is broken. The Time Mage can cast quick to give themselves 2 turns right in a row, to cast 2 meteors, or do whatever you need to do. This is good all through the back half of World 3. Every boss fight in the final dungeon can be trivialized with the proper application of Time Mage, except for Omega and Shinryu. The only point in the game where I feel Time Mage is going to be behind one of the other mage classes in your party would be right in the middle of World 1, where you're doing like the ancient library and stuff. But even there, if Time Mage is really your only functional damage dealer, they can break a rod if you have to. And finally, we have White Mage, and you know what? I have to put White Mage. I think the head of the B tier is appropriate for White Mage. Here's the deal. All the White Mage does is heals your party, either by equipping the healing staff and using it every turn, or by casting healing magic. Later on they can cast stuff like Protect and Shell, but that kind of stuff is less useful than you might expect, because a lot of bosses, especially in the back half of World 2 after those spells unlock, have like instant death attacks, or are just putting out way too much damage way too quickly that you don't really have a turn to cast Protect. You've got to be healing every round. The reason that they're way back here in B tier is usually for most boss fights, if you have some damage output, if you've got a way to win the fight within a minute or two, the healing staff is enough healing, and there are a couple other jobs that can do it. That said, it is so much more convenient to just cast Cura or something. Having a White Mage in the party is a little more useful than having a Ranger, even though the Ranger has the same kind of healing ability with their Animal Command, just because it's more reliable. You can cast it every round. The problem is, if you know what you're doing in the boss fights and you have a good strategy going in, which if you're running a Fiesta team, you probably will, you're not going to have to do a great amount of healing depending on your team makeup. If you've got any of the jobs from the S or A tiers in your party at all, you don't need a White Mage at any point in the run. Except maybe Thief and Bard. Like if your team is just Thief, Bard, White Mage, you probably will have to do a lot of healing. Very late in the game they get the Holy spell, but you know what? I always find Holy to be a little underwhelming compared to what the Summoner or the Black Mage or the Time Mage can put out with their own magic commands. So yeah, just a solid character to have in the party, and they will make any team survivable for as long as you need, but with a lot of boss fights, if you don't have the damage to back it up, you're really just making yourself more miserable by dragging that Soul Cannon fight out to 30 rounds instead of 10. So that's my Final Fantasy V job tier list, and I wasn't really expecting to make an inverted pyramid type shape, of which the Berserker is the bottom, obviously, but I think this is pretty accurate. I think NASA will be happy for this. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you agree. And like I said, if you don't, just scroll down and yell at me. You might as well.